joys you experience if you've ever had the opportunity to travel overseas is spending time in other cultures and other people groups. We are all an expression of our own culture and nationality, and there's a natural sense where what we're used to and how we relate is what we presume to be norm for everyone. But when you're immersed in different countries and cultures, it allows you to experience different aspects of the world and really gives you a greater appreciation for home, but also a greater appreciation for other people. On Monday, we began thinking about the day of the Lord and how God will help his people to escape from the threat of the nations around them. On Wednesday, we saw the result of God's salvation, which is the blessing of God expressed through living water. Well, today we'll see that the blessing of God does not stop at the borders of Israel, but people from all nations who turn to God will be welcomed into God's kingdom and so fall under God's love and care. However, salvation only occurs after judgment. In Zechariah 14 verse 14, Judah will also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected. Gold, silver, and clothing in great abundance. The same plague as the previous one will strike the horses, mules, camels, donkeys, and all the animals that are in those camps. Then all the survivors from the nations that come against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of armies, and to celebrate the festival of shelters. Should any of the families of the earth not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of armies, rain will not fall on them. And if the people of Egypt will not go up and enter, then rain will not fall on them. This will be the plague the Lord inflicts on the nations who do not go up to celebrate the festival of shelters. So God will bring judgment on the nations of Israel, and following that judgment there will be some who realize the foolishness of rejecting God as Lord and Saviour, and those who were once warriors will now become worshippers of God. And for those who honour God with their lives and in their families, they will be blessed. Zechariah 14 verse 20. On that day, the words, holy to the Lord, will be on the bells of the horses. The pots in the house of the Lord will be like the sprinkling basins before the altar. Every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holy to the Lord of armies. All who sacrifice will come and use the pots to cook in, and on that day there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord of armies. Now, I must admit that when I first read through the book of Zechariah, I was expecting a kind of more significant ending that wasn't about bells on horses, pots and pans, and the specific kind of notoriety of the Canaanite people. And I'll talk about the reference to the Canaanites when we look at this passage in our gatherings. However, the bells and pots provide an image, I think, that brings a wonderful conclusion to the book of Zechariah. The words holy to the Lord and the holiness of every pot in Jerusalem and Judah describe a land and people who are now connected to God without hindrance. Now we began Zechariah with the temple in the process of being rebuilt and the promise that once completed, then God would return to his people. Now the temple is completed, but something even greater has occurred. God's shepherd, who was pierced, has enabled his people to come back into relationship with him. So much so that the holiness of God that was previously only seen in the temple and, of course, in its articles will now be experienced throughout all of Israel. And not only that, but people from all nations will be able to experience the holiness of God as well. Now for us, this experience of holiness comes through Jesus. We are made holy through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so with that in mind, why don't you take a couple of minutes to pray and thank God for the book of Zechariah. Perhaps pray for one thing in particular from this book that God has helped you by encouraging your faith in Jesus. One thing that you can thank God for when it comes to this book, this wonderful book of Zechariah.